He watched her dance with another man for 12 months. On the 365th day, the Duke finally cut in. The ballroom of the Ashford Country Club never looked more radiant than on late September evenings, when the fading coastal light filtered through tall windows and caught the crystal chandeliers just right. Eleanor Hayes had learned to time her movements to that light, the way a conductor learns to read an orchestra. As the club's event coordinator and occasional ballroom dance instructor, she'd spent 3 years making sure every wedding, every gala, every autumn fundraiser felt like stepping into a dream. Tonight was the Harvest Ball, the social event that kicked off the fall season for Old Greenwich's elite. Eleanor adjusted the centerpiece on table 12, then stepped back to survey the room one final time before guests arrived. Everything was perfect, from the burgundy and gold linens to the string quartet tuning their instruments in the corner. She didn't notice him watching from the terrace. She never did. But if you're enjoying this story, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to share more stories with you. Pierce Ashford III, everyone called him Duke because his grandfather had called him that since birth, and the name stuck, stood with a glass of bourbon in his hand, his shoulders tense beneath his tailored navy suit. 12 months, 365 days of watching her move through these rooms like she belonged to them, watching her laugh with guests, watching her dance with him. Marcus Wellington was everything Duke wasn't anymore: uncomplicated, cheerful, publicly successful. The man owned 3 car dealerships across Connecticut and treated Eleanor like a prize he'd already won, which, Duke supposed, he had. The engagement ring had appeared on her finger 6 weeks ago, a respectable emerald-cut diamond that caught the light when she gestured. Duke took another drink and hated himself for counting the days. "You're lurking again," his sister Caroline said, appearing at his elbow with her trademark directness. At 32, she was 2 years younger than Duke, but infinitely more settled. Married to a pediatrician, mother of twins, living the kind of life their parents had always envisioned for both of them. "I'm observing," Duke corrected. "It's my club. I'm allowed to observe." "It's grandfather's club. You just run it." Caroline studied his face with the kind of penetrating gaze that had made her an excellent prosecutor before she'd left law to focus on family. "You should talk to her. There's nothing to say, except the truth." Duke's jaw tightened. The truth was a complicated beast, one that had teeth and claws and had already done enough damage. The truth was why he'd spent a year watching Eleanor dance with someone else. Why he'd kept his distance, even when everything in him screamed to cross the room and tell her exactly how he felt. The truth had destroyed everything once before. He wouldn't let it happen again. Guests began arriving in clusters. The Vanderhorts, the Caldwells, the bishops who'd summered in Old Greenwich since the 1920s. Duke slipped into his role as host, shaking hands and making small talk about market trends and upcoming renovations to the club's golf course. He was good at this, had been trained for it since childhood. The Ashford family had founded this club in 1903, and every generation since had carried the weight of that legacy. Sometimes the weight felt crushing. Eleanor appeared at 7:30 sharp, clipboard in hand. Her dark hair swept into an elegant twist that exposed the graceful line of her neck. She wore a deep plum dress that fell just below her knees, professional yet feminine, the kind of thing that made her fit seamlessly into this world, while making it clear she came from somewhere else entirely. She'd grown up in Bridgeport, the daughter of a postal worker and a school secretary. Worked 3 jobs to put herself through community college while taking care of her younger brother after their father died. She'd told Duke all of this during the interview 3 years ago, her chin lifted slightly as if daring him to judge her for it. He'd hired her on the spot. Marcus arrived 10 minutes later, striding through the entrance with the confidence of someone who'd never been told he didn't belong anywhere. He found Eleanor immediately, pulling her into a kiss that lasted just long enough to stake his claim. When they separated, Eleanor's professional smile looked strained around the edges. Duke turned away and ordered another bourbon. The dancing started at 8. The string quartet transitioned into classic standards. The Way You Look Tonight. Unforgettable. At last. And couples flooded the floor. Marcus guided Eleanor into a waltz with practiced competence, his hand possessive on her waist. They moved well together, Duke noted, with a twist of something dark in his chest. Marcus was a decent dancer, confident enough not to fumble the steps, but he didn't see what Duke saw. He didn't notice how Eleanor's smile never quite reached her eyes when she looked up at him, or how her shoulders held just a fraction of tension, or how she periodically glanced toward the French doors as if contemplating escape. "You're staring," Caroline murmured, circling back with her husband Richard in tow. "I'm supervising," Duke said. "Eleanor's worked hard on this event." "Right." Caroline exchanged a look with Richard that Duke pointedly ignored. "We're going to dance. You should too. Mrs. Caldwell has been making eyes at you all evening." Duke endured another hour of small talk and carefully choreographed socializing. He danced with Mrs. Caldwell, with Caroline, with several daughters of club members whose mothers harbored not-so-subtle hopes about advantageous marriages. He was polite, charming even, playing the role that had been written for him before he was born, and through it all he watched Eleanor dance with Marcus. Again and again, as the evening wore on, and the champagne flowed, and the party reached that warm, golden peak where everyone felt beautiful and beloved. Duke counted every dance, 11 in total, spread across 3 hours. By midnight, his self-control was razor-thin. The quartet had taken a break, and a jazz trio had taken over with something slower, smokier. Marcus had been pulled away by business associates, leaving Eleanor alone by the bar, nursing what looked like sparkling water. She'd slipped off her heels under the table, Duke noticed, and was absently rubbing her left foot. He was moving before he'd made a conscious decision, crossing the ballroom with purpose. Eleanor looked up as he approached, surprise flickering across her face. "Mr. Ashford." "Duke," he corrected, as he always did. "You've done exceptional work tonight, Eleanor. The event is flawless." A genuine smile broke through her professional mask, transforming her face. "Thank you. That means a lot." Silence stretched between them, charged with things unsaid. Duke could hear his pulse in his ears, feel the bourbon courage mixing with 12 months of suppressed everything. This was a mistake. He should walk away. He should dance with me, he said. Eleanor blinked. "I what?" "One dance. You've been working all evening. You deserve to actually enjoy the music." When she hesitated, Duke added softly, "Please, Eleanor." She glanced across the room where Marcus was deep in conversation, then back at Duke. Something shifted in her expression, curiosity maybe, or recognition of something she'd been avoiding too. "All right. One dance." Duke led her to the floor as the trio began a slow, aching version of "The Nearness of You." He placed his hand on her waist with careful respect, felt her hand settle on his shoulder, and began to move. The difference was immediate and electric. Eleanor fit against him like she'd been designed for it, her movements fluid and responsive in a way that went beyond technique. She was a trained dancer. She'd mentioned teaching ballroom in college. But this was something else. This was chemistry, pure and undeniable, the kind that made the air feel thicker and time feel slower. Duke felt her sharp intake of breath, saw her eyes widen as she felt it too. For a moment, they moved in silence, the music wrapping around them like a cocoon, separating them from the 100 other people in the room. "I've watched you dance all year," Duke said quietly, the words escaping before he could stop them. "You're extraordinary." Eleanor's step faltered slightly. "Duke, I know you're engaged. I know I have no right to say this. He tightened his grip fractionally, keeping her close. "But I've spent 12 months watching you with him, and I can't keep pretending I don't." Eleanor's voice was sharp, almost panicked. "Please don't finish that sentence." They continued moving, the music swelling around them. Duke could see the conflict in her face, the way she was fighting the same pull he felt. Her engagement ring caught the light, a glittering reminder of reality. "Why him?" Duke asked, unable to help himself. "You don't love him. I can see it every time you dance together." "You don't know anything about what I feel," Eleanor said, but there was no conviction in it. "Then tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you're completely happy, that you can't wait to marry him, that when he touches you it feels like—" Duke stopped himself, breathing hard. "Tell me I'm wrong, Eleanor." She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes fully, and what he saw there made his heart stop. Fear, longing, confusion, and underneath it all the same desperate wanting he felt burning in his own chest. "You have no idea what you're asking," she whispered. "You have no idea what—" She stopped abruptly, looking away. This was a mistake. But she didn't pull away. They kept dancing, locked together by something stronger than common sense or social expectations or the engagement ring that dug into Duke's shoulder blade where her hand rested. The song ended. The spell should have broken, but Duke didn't let go, and Eleanor didn't step back, and for one perfect, terrible moment, the entire ballroom seemed to disappear except for the two of them. "Eleanor!" Marcus's voice cut through the moment like a blade. "There you are. We need to leave. Early meeting tomorrow." Eleanor jerked back as if burned, her professional mask snapping back into place so fast it made Duke's chest ache. "Of course, I'll just get my things." She fled without looking back at Duke, gathering her shoes and clipboard with shaking hands. Marcus wrapped a possessive arm around her waist, nodded curtly at Duke, and guided her toward the exit. Duke stood alone on the dance floor, watching her leave, and felt something crack open inside his chest that had been sealed shut for exactly 12 months. Caroline appeared at his side. "So you finally did it." "Did what?" "Stopped being a coward." She studied him with concern. "What happens now?" Duke watched the doors close behind Eleanor and Marcus, watched his one dance disappear into the October night, and finally admitted the truth he'd been avoiding for a year. "Now, I tell her everything," he said, "even the parts that will make her hate me." The next morning arrived with cold rain, and Duke's grandfather demanding his presence at breakfast. Pierce Ashford II, at 87, maintained the same iron control over his family that he'd wielded over 3 generations of Connecticut business and society. The Ashford Mansion, a sprawling Georgian estate overlooking Long Island Sound, felt like a museum dedicated to their family's importance. Duke found his grandfather in the conservatory, reading the Wall Street Journal over Eggs Benedict and French-pressed coffee. The old man looked up as Duke entered, his pale blue eyes still sharp, despite his age. "The harvest ball was satisfactory," Pierce II said, which was his version of high praise. "Though I heard you made quite the spectacle of yourself." "Did you?" Duke poured coffee from the silver service, unsurprised. News travelled fast in their circle, and his dance with Eleanor had not gone unnoticed. "The Hayes girl is engaged," his grandfather continued. "To a suitable match, I might add. Wellington may be new money, but his businesses are solid. She could do worse. She could do better." Pierce II set down his newspaper with deliberate slowness. "We've had this conversation. The matter is settled." "The matter," Duke said carefully, "has never been settled. It's been buried. There's a difference." His grandfather's expression hardened. "What happened with Isabel was unfortunate." "Unfortunate?" Duke's control slipped. "She died, grandfather, because of lies and pressure and because she was unstable," Pierce interrupted sharply. A tragedy, certainly, but not your responsibility. You were 23 years old, for God's sake. You couldn't have known. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Duke had known. He'd seen Isabel Thornton unraveling under the weight of expectations neither of them wanted, had watched their arranged engagement slowly destroy her spark and joy. He'd been too weak to call it off, too concerned about disappointing his family, too afraid of the social fallout. Until Isabel had driven her car into the Sound on a rainy November evening 3 weeks before their wedding, leaving a note that made it clear the pressure had finally become too much. The scandal had been enormous. The Thornton family had blamed the Ashfords. The Ashfords had blamed the Thorntons. The truth that both families had pushed 2 young people into a disaster had been carefully buried beneath layers of PR and careful statements. Duke had spent the last 9 years carrying the guilt of it, swearing he'd never put anyone else through that kind of pressure again. Eleanor is different, Duke said now. She's working class, his grandfather said bluntly. However competent she may be at her job, she doesn't belong in our world. She'd be miserable and eventually she'd hate you for it, just like— He stopped himself. Just like Isabel, Duke finished. Is that what you were going to say? Pierce II's silence was answer enough. Duke set down his coffee cup with careful precision. I'm 34 years old. I've spent nearly a decade running this club exactly the way you wanted, maintaining appearances, being the perfect Ashford heir, but I'm done letting fear make my decisions. This isn't about fear. It's about wisdom. No, Duke said, it's about control, and I'm done giving you mine. He left before his grandfather could respond, driving back to the club through the rain with his hands tight on the wheel. His phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Caroline. Call me. Did you really walk out on grandfather? We need to talk, but he ignored them. The club was quiet on Sunday morning, just a skeleton staff preparing for brunch service. Duke went straight to his office, a wood-paneled room overlooking the 18th hole, and pulled out the file he'd been avoiding for months. Eleanor's personnel file. But underneath it, hidden in a locked drawer, was something else. A manila folder containing 12 months of surveillance he wasn't proud of, but couldn't help. Not surveillance, exactly. More like documentation. Photos from club events where Eleanor appeared in the background, looking beautiful and professional and just slightly out of place. Copies of event feedback forms where members praised her work. Notes about her preferences. She always ordered black coffee with 1 sugar, always arrived 15 minutes early, always triple-checked the seating arrangements. And one thing more, a faded newspaper clipping from 9 years ago, from the Hartford Courant. Isabel Thornton's obituary, with Duke's name mentioned once in the final paragraph about survivors. He'd kept it as a reminder, a warning about the cost of weakness. He spread the contents across his desk and stared at them, trying to see a path forward that didn't end in disaster. His phone rang. Caroline again. This time he answered. "You're an idiot," she said without preamble. "Good morning to you too. Grandfather is furious, mother is in tears, and you've accomplished exactly nothing except dramatic exit." Caroline's voice softened. "Duke, I get it. I understand why you're scared, but running away from grandfather doesn't solve the actual problem, which is that Eleanor doesn't know the truth. About Isabel, about why you've kept your distance, about any of it. She probably thinks you're just some rich guy who gets bored easily and decided to flirt with the help for entertainment." Duke winced. She wouldn't. Of course she would. What else is she supposed to think? You've been hot and cold for a year, watching her but never making a real move, and now you finally dance with her once and drop cryptic hints. Caroline sighed. You need to actually talk to her, the whole story, let her make an informed decision. And if she hates me for it? Then at least you'll know. At least she'll know. Duke, you can't protect people by keeping secrets. That's what grandfather did with Isabel, and look how that turned out. The truth of it hit him like a physical blow. Caroline was right. He'd spent a year protecting Eleanor from himself, from his family, from expectations and scandal. But all he'd really done was make the same mistake in a different form, deciding what she could handle without giving her a choice. "She's engaged," Duke said quietly. "I don't have the right to disrupt her life." "Is she happy?" Duke thought about the tension in Eleanor's shoulders when Marcus touched her, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes, the electric current that had run between them on the dance floor last night. "No," he admitted. "I don't think she is." "Then she deserves to know all her options, including you." Caroline paused. "But Duke, when you tell her, you need to tell her everything. The whole truth about Isabel, about grandfather, about why our family is the way it is. She deserves to know what she'd be walking into." After they hung up, Duke sat in his office for a long time, watching rain stream down the windows. Caroline was right. She was always right, damn her. He picked up his phone and typed out a message to Eleanor. "We need to talk, privately. It's important." He stared at the words for several minutes before hitting send. The response came 45 minutes later. "I'm at the club reviewing next month's calendar." "Office?" Duke's heart rate spiked. "Yes, thank you." He had 15 minutes to figure out how to explain 9 years of guilt, fear, and carefully maintained distance. 15 minutes to find words for feelings he'd barely let himself acknowledge. 15 minutes to decide if he was brave enough to risk everything he'd been protecting. Eleanor appeared in his doorway at exactly 11 o'clock, still wearing the rain-damp jacket she'd arrived in. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, and she looked younger this way, more like the determined young woman who'd walked into his office 3 years ago, asking for a chance. "You wanted to talk," she said, her voice carefully neutral. Duke gestured to the chairs across from his desk. "Please, sit." She did, perching on the edge of the seat with her spine straight and her hands folded in her lap. Professional distance, carefully maintained. But Duke could see the wariness in her eyes, the way she'd armored herself against whatever he might say. "Last night," he began. "Was a mistake," Eleanor said quickly. "I shouldn't have danced with you. It was unprofessional, and I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression about—" "Eleanor, please." Duke held up a hand. "Let me talk. Just let me say this, and then you can decide what you want to do." She went quiet, watching him with those sharp, intelligent eyes that never missed anything. Duke took a breath and started with the hardest part. 9 years ago, I was engaged to a woman named Isabel Thornton. Our families had known each other forever. Her father and my grandfather did business together. The engagement was expected, arranged even, though we tried to pretend it was romantic. He saw Eleanor's expression shift, surprise and something else flickering across her face. Isabel was beautiful, accomplished, everything our families wanted, but she wasn't happy. Neither of us were. We were playing roles, trying to fit into lives that didn't actually fit us. Duke stood, needing to move. He walked to the window, keeping his back to Eleanor, because this next part was easier, without seeing her reaction. Isabel started showing signs of depression, anxiety. She'd have panic attacks before family dinners, would cry in her car before coming into the club for wedding planning meetings. I saw it happening, but I didn't know how to help. I was 23 and terrified of disappointing my family, of causing a scandal. So I did nothing. I just kept going through the motions, hoping it would somehow work out. The rain continued to drum against the windows, filling the silence. 3 weeks before our wedding, Isabel drove her car off the causeway into the Sound. She left a note. Duke's voice cracked slightly. She wrote that she couldn't be what everyone expected, that she felt like she was suffocating under the weight of all the plans and expectations and pressure. She apologized for being weak. He heard Eleanor's sharp intake of breath behind him. The families tried to keep it quiet, but the tabloids got hold of it. It was ugly. Her parents blamed mine. Mine blamed hers. Nobody talked about the real problem, that we'd both been pushed into something neither of us wanted, and I'd been too much of a coward to call it off. Duke finally turned to face Eleanor. I swore I'd never put anyone in that position again, never let family pressure or social expectations dictate my relationships, never trap someone in a life they didn't choose. Eleanor's face was pale, her eyes shimmering. Duke, I'm so sorry. God, that's terrible. It gets worse, Duke said grimly, because despite everything I learned, despite all my promises to myself, I've spent the last 3 years doing the same thing all over again with you. Eleanor blinked. What? I fell for you the day you interviewed here. You walked in with your second-hand briefcase and your community college degree, and you looked at this place, this bastion of old money and exclusivity, and you weren't intimidated at all. You just wanted to show what you could do. Duke managed a bitter smile. You were so real, so genuinely yourself. After years of people performing for my family's approval, you were like fresh air. Duke, I hired you because you were the best candidate, but I kept you at arm's length because I was terrified. Terrified my family would pressure you the way they'd pressured Isabel. Terrified you'd try to fit into my world and lose yourself in the process. Terrified I'd be weak again and let it happen. He met her eyes directly. So I watched you from a distance. I made sure your career here flourished, that you got every resource and recognition you deserved. And I told myself that was enough, that keeping my distance was protecting you. Eleanor stood slowly, her expression difficult to read. For a year. For a year, Duke confirmed, while you started dating Marcus, while you got engaged, while I convinced myself I was doing the right thing by staying away. He laughed without humor. And then last night I danced with you and I realized I'm not protecting you at all. I'm just being the same coward I was 9 years ago. The silence stretched between them, heavy with revelation. Eleanor hugged her arms around herself, looking smaller than Duke had ever seen her. Why are you telling me this now? She asked finally. Because you deserve the truth. Because I'm tired of making decisions for other people based on my own fear. Because... Duke stopped, gathering his courage. Because I love you, Eleanor. I've loved you for 3 years, and I can't watch you marry someone else without at least telling you that you have another choice. Eleanor's eyes went wide, her hands trembling slightly. You can't just... Duke, I'm engaged. I have a life planned. Marcus is... Does he make you happy? That's not fair. Does he? Duke pressed. Because from where I stand, he makes you comfortable. He makes you safe. He's nice and normal and wants exactly what you want. Suburban house, regular life, escape from all this. He gestured around the office. But does he make your heart race? Does he understand the way you care about your work? Does he see you the way I do? Eleanor's composure finally cracked. You have no right to ask me these things. You've spent 3 years ignoring me, treating me like an employee, never giving any indication that you... She stopped, pressing her hands to her face. God, this is so unfair. I know. I've been planning a life with Marcus. My brother finally has stability. I've finally found security, and you're asking me to throw all of that away for... What? A man whose family will never accept me? Who comes with enough baggage to sink a ship? Yes, Duke said simply. That's exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to take a risk on someone who's messy and scared and comes from a world that will judge you. Someone who's spent years making the wrong choices for the right reasons. He took a step toward her. But I'm also promising that if you choose this, choose me, I won't let my family's expectations poison it. I won't let anyone make you feel like you need to be someone you're not, and I'll spend every day making sure you never regret it. Eleanor stared at him, tears streaming down her face now, her careful composure completely shattered. "I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I'm brave enough." "You're the bravest person I know," Duke said softly. "You built a career in a place where you were an outsider. You took care of your family when you were barely more than a kid. You've survived in a world that didn't make space for you and made them make space anyway. That's different. That's just work. It's not different. You're already brave enough. The question is whether you want to be." Eleanor turned away from him, walking to the window and pressing her forehead against the glass. Duke watched the tension in her shoulders, the way she was fighting some internal battle he couldn't see. Finally, she spoke without turning around. "Marcus proposed 6 weeks ago. I said yes because it made sense, because he's kind and stable and wants a simple life. Because I thought I was over this stupid crush I had on my boss, this fantasy I'd built up about someone who barely looked at me." She laughed shakily. "I was so angry at you last night, when you asked me to dance, when you said all those things, because you were confirming everything I'd been trying to convince myself wasn't real." "Eleanor?" She turned to face him, and her expression was raw with conflict. "But I'm still engaged. I still said yes to Marcus, and he's done nothing wrong except not be you." "Then talk to him. Tell him the truth. Give him the chance to walk away cleanly rather than marrying someone who's in love with someone else." "I never said I was in love with you." Duke felt his heart stop. "Aren't you?" Eleanor closed her eyes, fresh tears spilling over. "That's not the point. That's the only point that matters." She opened her eyes and looked at him with such naked longing it took his breath away. "If I do this, if I even consider this, I need time. I need to talk to Marcus. I need to think about what I'm walking away from and what I'd be walking into." Her voice hardened. "And I need to know you're serious, that this isn't just some romantic impulse that will evaporate when your family puts pressure on you, because I won't be your Isabel, Duke. I won't slowly crumble under expectations I can't meet. If I choose you, you need to choose me too, all the way, no matter what your grandfather says." "I choose you," Duke said without hesitation. "I've been choosing you every day for a year by actively not choosing you. That's over now. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Eleanor held his gaze for a long moment, searching for something. Duke made himself stand still, letting her see everything, the fear, the hope, the desperate love he'd been carrying for so long. "I need 3 days," she said finally. 3 days to figure this out. "Can you give me that?" "I'll give you whatever you need." She nodded shakily and moved toward the door. When she reached it, she paused and looked back at him. "For what it's worth, last night wasn't a mistake. Dancing with you was the first time in months I felt like myself." Then she was gone, leaving Duke alone in his office with the rain still falling and his heart hammering in his chest. 3 days. He could survive 3 days. He had to. Eleanor drove home in a daze, her mind reeling from everything Duke had told her. Isabel Thornton. 9 years of guilt, 3 years of watching from a distance. The raw confession of love that had turned her carefully constructed plans into rubble. Her apartment in Bridgeport was a modest 1-bedroom in a converted factory building, rent-stabilized and practical. Nothing like the waterfront mansions of Old Greenwich or even Marcus's spacious condo in Stamford. But it was hers, paid for with her own work, decorated with her own taste. It felt safe, except right now, nothing felt safe. She dropped her keys on the kitchen counter and immediately called her best friend Emma, who picked up on the second ring. "Please tell me you're calling with wedding dress news," Emma said cheerfully, "because I've found Duke's in love with me." Silence. Then, "I'm coming over. Don't move." Emma Chen had been Eleanor's roommate in community college, the daughter of Chinese immigrants who owned a restaurant in New Haven. She'd gone on to become a social worker specializing in family services, and she had a bullshit detector that could spot lies from space. She also had strong opinions about Marcus. She arrived 30 minutes later with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine, took one look at Eleanor's face and said, "Start from the beginning." Eleanor told her everything. The dance last night, this morning's conversation, Isabel's story, Duke's confession. By the time she finished, Emma had poured them both generous glasses of wine and was watching her with an expression Eleanor couldn't quite read. "Okay," Emma said finally. "First question, do you love him?" "Emma, don't deflect. Simple question. Do you love Duke Ashford?" Eleanor closed her eyes. The honest answer had been trying to surface for 3 years, kept carefully submerged beneath professionalism and self-preservation. "Yes, God, yes. I've been in love with him probably since my first month at the club. But it was impossible, so I just buried it. And when Marcus came along and made sense, I thought maybe I could build something real with someone who was actually available." "But you can't," Emma said gently, "because you're not in love with Marcus." "I care about him. That's not the same thing, and you know it." Emma leaned forward. "Ellie, I've watched you with Marcus for 7 months. He's nice. He treats you well. He checks all the boxes on paper. But you light up more talking about event planning than you do talking about him." Eleanor felt tears prickling again. "That doesn't mean I should blow up my life for some fantasy. Duke comes from a completely different world. His grandfather runs that family like a corporation. Did you hear the part about his last fiancée?" "I heard the part about a family that drove a young woman to suicide through pressure and expectations, and about a man who spent 9 years carrying that guilt and trying to do better." Emma's voice was firm. "I also heard the part about him spending 3 years protecting you from that same pressure by keeping his distance. That's not nothing, Ellie. Or it's proof that we could never work, that his family would always be a problem." "Maybe," Emma conceded, "but that's his battle to fight, not yours. Your battle is figuring out what you actually want." She squeezed Eleanor's hand. "What does your gut say?" Eleanor thought about last night's dance, about the way her body had responded to Duke's touch, like coming home, about 3 years of stolen glances and carefully maintained professional distance and the electric current that ran between them whenever they were in the same room. "My gut says to run toward him as fast as I can," she admitted, "but my gut has made mistakes before." "Has it? Or have you just learned to ignore it in favor of what makes sense?" That hit uncomfortably close to home. Eleanor had spent her entire adult life making practical choices, building security through careful planning and risk mitigation. It had served her well. She had a good job, financial stability, respect in her field. But had it made her happy? "I need to talk to Marcus," Eleanor said. "He deserves honesty." "He does," Emma agreed, "but be careful. Don't stay with him just because it's easier than leaving. That's not fair to either of you." After Emma left, Eleanor sat alone in her apartment and stared at her engagement ring. It really was beautiful, traditional, appropriate, expensive enough to signal Marcus's success. Everything a ring should be, but when Duke had held her last night, she'd forgotten she was wearing it. She picked up her phone and texted Marcus, "Can we talk tomorrow?" Something important came up. His response was immediate. "Everything okay? Want me to come over?" "No, I'm fine. Just need to discuss something in person. Coffee before work?" "Sure thing. 7 a.m. at the usual place?" "Perfect. See you then." Eleanor set down her phone and finally let herself cry, for the comfort she was about to destroy, for the complications she was walking into, for the impossible choice between safety and desire. She cried until she was empty, and then she started thinking about what she was going to say. Marcus Wellington was already waiting at the Starbucks when Eleanor arrived at 6:50 the next morning. He looked exactly like he always did. Khakis and a button-down, hair neatly combed, smile warm and welcoming. He'd ordered her usual, a vanilla latte with an extra shot. "You look tired," he said, standing to kiss her cheek. "Everything all right?" "Not really." Eleanor sat down across from him, her stomach churning. "Marcus, we need to talk about us." His smile faltered. "That's never a good way to start a conversation." "I know, I'm sorry." Eleanor twisted her engagement ring, gathering her words. "You're a good man. You've been nothing but kind and supportive, and you deserve someone who's all in, who's excited about building a life with you." "But you're not," Marcus said quietly. His face had gone still, bracing for impact. "I thought I was. I wanted to be, but—" Eleanor forced herself to meet his eyes. "I'm in love with someone else." Marcus absorbed this for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tight. "Let me guess. Your boss." Eleanor's surprise must have shown on her face because Marcus gave a bitter laugh. "I'm not blind, Ellie. I've seen the way you look at him when you think no one's watching, the way he watches you like you're the only person in the room." He picked up his coffee with shaking hands. "I kept hoping it was just attraction, something you'd get over, that what we had would be enough." "I wanted it to be enough," Eleanor said, tears spilling over. "I really did. You're stable and kind, and you want the same future I want. But I'm not him." Marcus set down his cup. "Does he feel the same way?" Eleanor nodded, not trusting her voice. "Then I guess that's that." Marcus pulled the coffee stirrer apart, his jaw working. "For what it's worth, I think you're making a mistake. His world will eat you alive, but I guess you need to figure that out yourself." "Marcus, don't." He held up a hand. "Just don't. I'm not going to make this harder by begging you to stay or trying to change your mind. You don't love me. That's clear enough." He stood abruptly. "I'll have my mom pick up her ring from your place tomorrow. She'll want it back. It was her grandmother's." The guilt crashed over Eleanor in waves. "I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve this." "No," Marcus agreed. "I didn't, but neither did you. You deserve someone who lights you up the way he does. I hope it works out better than I think it will." He walked out without looking back, leaving Eleanor alone with 2 barely touched coffees and the weight of what she'd just done. She sat there for several minutes, processing the end of her engagement, before pulling out her phone and texting Duke. "I broke up with Marcus. I need some time to process everything, but I wanted you to know." His response came within seconds. "Are you okay? Do you want company?" "I need to be alone right now, but thank you. I'm here whenever you're ready. No pressure." Eleanor finished her latte and went to work, moving through the day in a fog of emotional exhaustion. She had meetings about Thanksgiving planning, calls with vendors, 100 small decisions that required her professional focus. She performed her job competently because that's what she did. She showed up and delivered, no matter what was happening in her personal life. But underneath the professional mask, she was terrified. She'd just blown up her safe, planned future for a man whose family had driven his last fiancée to suicide, for a love that came with complications and social pressure and so many ways it could go wrong. What had she done? By the time she got home that evening, Eleanor was questioning everything. She'd just destroyed a good man's trust and heart. She'd given up security and stability for feelings that might not survive reality. She'd made a massive, potentially disastrous decision based on one dance and a confession. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "How did it go with Marcus?" "It's over. He took it about as badly as you'd expect." "And how are you?" "Terrified." "Want me to come over?" "No, I need to sit with this. Figure out what comes next." Eleanor spent the evening alone, letting herself feel everything, the guilt over Marcus, the fear about Duke, the uncertainty about her future. She'd spent so long being practical, making safe choices, building security through careful planning. Now she'd thrown all of that away for feelings. But God, those feelings. The way Duke had looked at her when he said he loved her. The way her entire body had responded when they danced. 3 years of chemistry finally acknowledged, finally given permission to exist. Was that enough to build a life on? Could love survive when it came with so many obstacles? She didn't know. But for the first time in her life, Eleanor had chosen desire over safety, and there was no going back now. Duke found out about the breakup through the old Greenwich grapevine before Eleanor's text arrived. Marcus's mother, it seemed, had not been discreet about her disappointment, and several club members felt compelled to share their opinions about the whole scandalous situation. Mrs. Vanderhort cornered him at the club bar Monday evening, her expression sympathetic in that predatory way wealthy women perfected. Such a shame about the Wellington engagement. I always thought Eleanor was aiming above her station, but Marcus seemed genuinely fond of her. Duke's jaw tightened. Eleanor is one of the most capable professionals I've ever worked with. Marcus was lucky to have her attention. Oh, of course, dear. I'm sure her work ethic is admirable. Mrs. Vanderhort's smile didn't reach her eyes, though one does wonder about the timing. First she's engaged, then she's dancing rather intimately with you at the harvest ball, and now suddenly she's free again. People will talk, you know. People always talk, Duke said flatly, usually because they have nothing better to do. He excused himself before he said something he'd regret and retreated to his office, where he found Caroline waiting with her arms crossed and her prosecutor face on. "We need to discuss your situation," she said without preamble. "My situation is none of your business." "It absolutely is my business when it affects the family. Grandfather is already furious. Mother is fielding calls from concerned friends. And you're at the center of a scandal involving an employee breaking off an engagement supposedly because of you." Duke poured himself a scotch and didn't offer Caroline one. Eleanor made her own choice. "I'm not going to apologize for being honest about my feelings. I'm not asking you to apologize. I'm asking you to have a plan." Caroline softened slightly. "Duke, I support this. I think Eleanor is wonderful, but you need to understand what you're walking into. Grandfather will fight you every step of the way. Mother will guilt you with references to Isabel. Half the club membership will treat Eleanor like a gold digger who seduced you. Then they'll deal with my response when they do." "Which is what exactly? Are you going to resign from the club, move away, cut off the family?" Caroline studied his face. "Because those are real options you need to consider. This isn't like dating someone from our circle who already knows the rules. Eleanor has no armor against this world, no practice dealing with the kind of subtle cruelty these people specialize in." Duke thought about Isabel, about how the pressure had slowly worn her down until she couldn't breathe, about how he'd seen it happening and had been too weak to stop it. "I'll protect her," he said. "You can't protect someone from society itself. You can only teach them how to protect themselves." Caroline's expression turned gentle. "Talk to her, Duke. Have honest conversations about what her life would look like if she's with you. Don't make the same mistake twice by assuming you know what's best for her." After Caroline left, Duke sat alone in his office and acknowledged the truth. His sister was right. He'd spent 9 years learning from his mistakes with Isabel, but Eleanor deserved more than just his guilt-driven caution. She deserved to know exactly what she was choosing, complications and all. He texted her, "I know you need time, but when you're ready to talk, I have some things I need to be honest about. Fair warning, they're not pretty." Her response came an hour later. "Tomorrow evening, my place, I'll be there." Duke spent the next day in a state of controlled anxiety, managing club operations while mentally preparing for the most important conversation of his life. He had to be honest about his family's dysfunction, about the social pressure Eleanor would face, about all the ways being with him would complicate her life. He also had to trust her to make her own choice, even if that choice was to walk away. At 6:30, he drove to Bridgeport with a knot in his stomach. Eleanor's building was exactly the kind of place she'd choose, solid, practical, well-maintained but unpretentious. He found her apartment on the 3rd floor and knocked before he could overthink it. She opened the door, in jeans and a sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders, and she looked more beautiful than anyone had a right to be. "Come in," she said softly. Her apartment was small but thoughtfully decorated. Bookshelves full of event planning guides and novels, photos of her and a young man Duke assumed was her brother, a vintage typewriter on a desk by the window. It felt like her, unpretentious and genuine. "Can I get you something to drink?" Eleanor asked, moving toward the small kitchen. "I'm fine. Thank you." Duke stayed in the doorway, suddenly uncertain. "Eleanor, let me start," she interrupted. She took a breath, her hands twisting together nervously. "I broke things off with Marcus, not just because of you, though that was part of it, but because I realized I was settling for comfortable when I wanted more, even if more is terrifying and complicated." "Complicated is putting it mildly," Duke said. He moved further into the room but kept distance between them, needing space to say difficult things. "My family is going to make your life hell. My grandfather has already made comments about your background. My mother will try to guilt me by comparing you to Isabel. Half the club members think you're a gold digger who seduced me." Eleanor's expression tightened, but she didn't look surprised. "I expected that. But there's more you need to know." Duke forced himself to continue. "My grandfather controls the family trust. I have a generous salary from the club and my own investments, but the real Ashford money is locked behind conditions, including marriage approval. If we're together, he could cut me off entirely. I don't care about your money. I know you don't. But it matters because it gives him power. He can threaten my position at the club, can make things difficult for your career, can use financial pressure to try to break us up." Duke met her eyes. "I need you to understand that choosing me means choosing a fight, not just with my family, but with an entire social system that's designed to keep people like you out." Eleanor's chin came up, that familiar determination sparking in her eyes. "I grew up poor, Duke. I worked 3 jobs while taking care of my brother. I built a career in a world that didn't want me. I'm not afraid of a fight." "This is different." "No, it's not." She moved closer, closing the distance between them. "It's the same fight in a different outfit. People thinking I don't belong. People underestimating me, having to prove myself every single day." Her voice turned fierce. "I've been doing that my whole life. At least with you, I'd be fighting for something I actually want." Duke felt something in his chest crack open. "You're sure? Because once we do this, there's no going back to how things were. Your reputation will be tied to mine. Every success you have, people will credit to our relationship. Every failure will be used as proof you didn't belong. Let them try." Eleanor stepped even closer until Duke could smell her shampoo, until he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "I'm not Isabel. I'm not going to crumble under pressure, but I need to know you won't either. That when your grandfather threatens you, when your mother cries, when the easy thing would be to walk away, I need to know you'll choose me anyway." "I choose you," Duke said without hesitation. "Whatever comes, I choose you." Eleanor's eyes searched his face for a long moment, looking for doubt or hesitation. She must not have found any, because suddenly she was kissing him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her mouth hot and desperate against his. Duke responded instantly, wrapping his arms around her and pulling her close, kissing her back with 3 years of pent-up longing. She tasted like coffee and determination, and she fit against him perfectly, every curve and angle aligning like they'd been designed for this. They broke apart gasping, foreheads pressed together, and Duke realized he was shaking. "I love you," he said, the words raw and honest. "God, Eleanor, I love you so much." "I love you too," she whispered. "I've loved you for so long." They kissed again, slower this time, savouring it. Duke let his hands tangle in her hair, felt her fingers trace the line of his jaw, and for the first time in 9 years he felt like he might actually deserve this kind of happiness. When they finally pulled apart, Eleanor was smiling, really smiling, the kind of joy that transformed her entire face. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we figure this out together," Duke said, "one day at a time, one battle at a time. Starting with your grandfather." "Starting with my grandfather," Duke agreed. "He wants to have dinner this Friday, supposedly to discuss club business, but really to lecture me about making appropriate choices." He took Eleanor's hand, threading their fingers together. "I'd like you to come with me. Let him see that I'm serious." Eleanor's smile turned slightly wicked. "You want me to crash your family dinner? I want you to meet the family you're signing up for. Fair warning, it will be deeply unpleasant." "I've handled worse." Eleanor squeezed his hand. "Besides, I want to meet the man who thinks I'm not good enough for you. I have some opinions about that." Duke laughed, the sound surprising him. When was the last time he'd actually laughed? "This is going to be a disaster." "Probably," Eleanor agreed cheerfully. "But at least it'll be our disaster." They spent the rest of the evening talking about Eleanor's childhood in Bridgeport, about Duke's isolation growing up in the mansion, about their hopes and fears and all the complicated realities they'd be navigating. They ordered pizza and ate it on Eleanor's couch, and Duke felt more at home in her tiny apartment than he'd ever felt in his family's estate. By the time he left at midnight, they'd made plans. Friday dinner with his grandfather, followed by a serious conversation with Eleanor's brother, followed by facing the club members together. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in 9 years, Duke felt like he was moving towards something instead of running away. He drove home through empty streets, his phone buzzing with messages from Carolyn, "Call me ASAP," and his mother. "Your grandfather told me about Eleanor. We need to talk." He ignored them all, feeling lighter than he had in years. Whatever storm was coming, he was ready for it. Friday arrived with unseasonable warmth, the kind of late October day that felt like summer's last gasp. Eleanor spent the morning second-guessing her outfit choices. Too casual would look disrespectful, too formal would look like she was trying too hard. She finally settled on a navy sheath dress with modest heels, professional but not submissive. Emma called at noon. "You're really doing this? Walking into the lion's den?" "I'm really doing this," Eleanor confirmed, checking her makeup in the mirror. "Duke's been honest about how bad it might be, but if I'm going to be with him, I need to face this head-on. Just remember, you don't owe them anything, not politeness, not deference, nothing. If they're horrible, you can leave." "I won't leave," Eleanor said. "Duke needs to see I can handle this. Duke needs to see he can handle this. It's his family doing the judging." Emma's voice turned gentle. "Just be careful, okay? Don't let them make you feel small." Duke picked her up at 6, looking nervous in a way she'd never seen him. His hands were tight on the steering wheel as they drove toward Old Greenwich, toward the massive estate overlooking the Sound. "Last chance to back out," he said, only half joking. "Not a chance." Eleanor reached over and squeezed his hand. "We're in this together, remember?" The Ashford mansion was even more intimidating in person than Eleanor had imagined. A sprawling Georgian structure with manicured grounds and water views that probably cost more than most people made in a lifetime. Duke led her through massive front doors into a foyer that could have fit her entire apartment. Caroline met them there, offering Eleanor a warm but worried smile. "You must be Eleanor. I'm so glad to finally meet you properly." She lowered her voice. "Fair warning, grandfather's in rare form tonight. Don't let him rattle you." Pierce Ashford II was waiting in the dining room, seated at the head of a table that could seat 20. He was smaller than Eleanor expected, diminished by age but still emanating authority like a force field. His pale eyes tracked her entrance with cold assessment. "So you're the young woman causing all this disruption," he said without preamble. Eleanor held his gaze. "I'm Eleanor Hayes. Thank you for including me this evening." "I didn't include you. My grandson insisted." Pierce gestured curtly to a chair. "Sit. Let's not pretend this is a social call." Duke's jaw tightened, but Eleanor touched his arm lightly and took her seat. The dining room was oppressively formal, crystal and silver, and family portraits dating back generations. Eleanor felt the weight of all that history, all those expectations. Duke's mother arrived moments later, a slim woman in her 60s who looked like she'd stepped out of a country club catalogue. She kissed Duke's cheek, but barely glanced at Eleanor, taking her seat with visible tension. Dinner was served by silent staff. Roasted duck with cherries, asparagus, potatoes, dauphinoise. Eleanor focused on maintaining perfect posture and eating properly, while Pierce Ashford subjected her to interrogation disguised as conversation. "Duke tells me you studied at community college," he said, making it sound like a communicable disease. "I did. I worked full-time and took care of my younger brother while earning my degree in hospitality management." "How industrious. And your family? What does your father do?" "My father was a postal worker. He passed away when I was 19. Eleanor kept her voice steady. "My mother is a secretary at an elementary school in Bridgeport." Pierce's expression suggested she'd confirmed his worst suspicions. "I see. And you believe you're equipped to navigate Duke's world with that background?" "Grandfather," Duke started. "I'm asking her." Pierce's gaze never left Eleanor. "Well, Miss Hayes." Eleanor set down her fork with careful precision. "I believe I'm equipped to navigate any world I choose to be part of. I've built a career in an environment that didn't make space for me and made them make space anyway. I've managed events for some of the wealthiest families in Connecticut and earned their respect through competence and professionalism." She met his eyes directly. "What I don't believe is that background or pedigree determines worth. But then, we seem to disagree on that point." The silence was deafening. Caroline looked impressed. Duke's mother looked horrified. Pierce Ashford's expression was unreadable. "Spirited," he said finally. "I'll give you that. But spirit doesn't change facts. You come from nothing. You have no understanding of the obligations that come with this family. You'll embarrass Duke in social situations, make gaffes he'll have to smooth over, drag down the family reputation." "The way Isabel did," Eleanor said quietly. The temperature in the room dropped 20 degrees. Duke's mother made a small sound of distress. Caroline's eyes went wide. Pierce's face darkened. "How dare you? How dare I mention her?" Eleanor continued, her voice steady but fierce. "She was a real person who died because the expectations of this family crushed her. Duke has carried that guilt for 9 years because none of you would acknowledge your part in it. And now you're trying to do the same thing to me. Make me feel inadequate, make Duke doubt his choice, apply pressure until something breaks." "Eleanor," Duke's mother began. "No." Eleanor turned to her. "Mrs. Ashford, I'm sorry your family went through tragedy. I'm sorry Duke lost someone he cared about. But using Isabel's death as a weapon against him, against us, is cruel. And it won't work because I'm not Isabel. I won't crumble. I won't disappear. And I won't let you make Duke feel guilty for choosing his own happiness." Pierce stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This dinner is over. Duke, I want to speak with you privately. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Eleanor." "Fine." Pierce's voice turned cold. "If you pursue this relationship, I will remove you from your position at the club. I will restrict your access to the family trust. I will make it clear to every member of our social circle that this woman is not to be welcomed." Duke stood as well, pulling Eleanor up with him. "Then I'll find another position. I'll live on my own money, and I'll build a life with Eleanor that has nothing to do with your approval." His voice was steady, certain. "I spent 9 years letting guilt and fear control me. That's over now. I love Eleanor. I choose Eleanor. And if that means walking away from all of this," he gestured around the opulent room, "then that's what I'll do." Pierce's expression turned dangerous. "You would throw away 4 generations of family legacy for this girl. I would throw away anything that asks me to be less than myself. That asks Eleanor to be less than herself." Duke took Eleanor's hand, his grip firm and sure. "We're leaving." They walked out together, Eleanor's heart hammering but her head high. Caroline followed them to the door, grabbing Duke's arm. "I'll talk to him," she said. "He's angry now, but he'll calm down. This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Duke said. "It's been over for a long time. I was just too afraid to admit it." They drove back to Eleanor's apartment in silence, the adrenaline slowly fading. When they arrived, Duke parked but didn't move to get out, his hands still gripping the wheel. "I just destroyed my relationship with my entire family," he said quietly. "You stood up for yourself. For us." Eleanor turned to face him. "That took courage. Or stupidity." Duke laughed shakily. "I might be out of a job by Monday. My trust fund is definitely gone. I just threw away financial security for love," Eleanor interrupted. "For choosing your own life. For refusing to repeat the mistakes that killed Isabel." She cupped his face in her hands. "I won't let you regret this. We'll figure out the practical stuff. Together." Duke kissed her then, desperate and grateful, and Eleanor felt the last of her doubts evaporate. They were in this now, fully committed, and whatever came next, they'd face as a team. Over the next 2 weeks, the fallout was intense. Pierce Ashford made good on his threat, calling an emergency board meeting to discuss Duke's conduct unbecoming and his relationship with staff. Several longtime club members supported the motion to remove him as director, but others didn't. Caroline had been busy making calls, reminding people of Duke's years of dedicated service, of the innovations he'd brought to the club, of his professional reputation. Eleanor's work spoke for itself. Club events had never been better attended or more successful. The vote ended in a stalemate, forcing a compromise. Duke would remain as director, but he'd be on probation for 6 months. Any hint of impropriety with Eleanor, who would retain her position, would result in immediate termination. It was better than nothing, but it meant they had to be flawlessly professional at work while navigating their personal relationship outside the club. Every interaction was scrutinized. Every event Eleanor planned was examined for favoritism. The pressure was constant and exhausting. Eleanor's brother Daniel, a college sophomore at UConn, had his own concerns when she finally told him about Duke. They met for coffee in Hartford, and his protectiveness was immediate and fierce. "He's your boss," Daniel said, his jaw tight. "That's a power imbalance. How do you know he's not taking advantage?" "Because I pursued him as much as he pursued me. Because we spent a year staying apart specifically to avoid that dynamic." Eleanor reached across the table. "Danny, I know you're worried, but Duke is a good man who sacrificed a lot to be with me. I need you to trust my judgment." "I trust you. I don't trust him. Not yet." Daniel's expression softened. "But I'll give him a chance, because you deserve to be happy, and if he makes you happy, then I'll try." It was more than Eleanor could have hoped for. The real test came in mid-November, at the annual Thanksgiving Gala. It was Eleanor's biggest event of the year, and the club would be packed with members eager to judge both her professional competence and her relationship with Duke. The morning of the gala, Eleanor received an anonymous note slipped under her apartment door. "Gold diggers always get found out eventually. Enjoy it while it lasts." She showed it to Duke, who went pale with anger. I'll find out who... No, Eleanor crumpled the note. That's exactly what they want. Drama, proof that I'm a distraction. She took his hands. We ignore it. We do our jobs flawlessly. We show them we're professional and serious and unshakable. The gala was perfection. Every detail executed exactly as planned. Eleanor moved through the evening with quiet confidence, managing crises, coordinating staff, ensuring every guest felt welcomed. Duke maintained appropriate professional distance while making it subtly clear to anyone watching that Eleanor had his complete support and respect. By the end of the night, even the skeptics had to acknowledge that Eleanor Hayes was exceptional at her job, relationship or not. Mrs. Vanderhort, who'd been one of the loudest critics, approached Eleanor as guests were leaving. I admit, dear, you've surprised me. This evening was spectacular. Thank you, Mrs. Vanderhort. Perhaps I was too quick to judge. The older woman's expression turned almost kind. My husband and I had our own scandal when we married. He was supposed to marry my cousin, but chose me instead. Caused quite the uproar. She patted Eleanor's hand. It takes spine to build a life in the face of disapproval. You seem to have plenty of that. It wasn't acceptance exactly, but it was acknowledgement. Eleanor would take it. By Christmas, things had settled into a new normal. Duke and Eleanor were openly together, navigating the complications with hard-won grace. Pierce Ashford maintained his disapproval, but had stopped active sabotage, perhaps recognizing he'd pushed as hard as he could without losing his grandson entirely. Duke's mother had started making tentative efforts, brief phone calls, neutral comments about Eleanor's work. It wasn't warmth, but it wasn't hostility either. Caroline had become a genuine friend, inviting Eleanor to family events and running interference when necessary. The club membership had mostly accepted the relationship, or at least stopped openly questioning it. Eleanor's consistent excellence had made her indispensable, and Duke's steady leadership had reminded everyone why they'd trusted him in the first place. But the real victory came on New Year's Eve. Duke had planned something special, not a grand gesture at the club, but something private and meaningful. He took Eleanor to a small dance studio in New Haven, empty for the holiday, where he'd arranged for live music. No audience, he said, pulling her into his arms as a jazz trio began to play. No judgment, just us. They danced in the empty studio, moving together with the ease of partners who'd finally stopped fighting the inevitable. Eleanor rested her head on Duke's shoulder and felt the rightness of it. This choice, this man, this complicated, beautiful life they were building. I have something for you, Duke said after several songs. He pulled back and reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. Eleanor's breath caught. Duke, I know it's fast. I know we have more to prove to everyone, including ourselves. He opened the box to reveal a stunning sapphire ring, deep blue and elegant. But I also know I want to spend my life with you, that I want to face every battle, every challenge, every triumph together. His eyes were bright with emotion. Eleanor Hayes, will you marry me? Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face, felt joy rising up so fierce it took her breath away. Yes, God, yes. Duke slipped the ring on her finger, a perfect fit, and kissed her with such tenderness, Eleanor thought her heart might burst. They held each other in that empty studio, swaying to music only they could hear now, and Eleanor marveled at the journey that had brought them here. From careful distance to forbidden dance to this moment of absolute certainty. It had been complicated and messy and hard-won, but that's what made it real. That's what made it theirs. 365 days, Duke murmured against her hair. That's how long I watched you dance with someone else. I'm never letting you go again. Good, Eleanor said, smiling through tears, because I'm not going anywhere. They danced until midnight, celebrating the new year and their new beginning. When they finally left the studio, stepping out into the cold January air, Eleanor looked at the sapphire on her finger, not a traditional diamond, but something uniquely theirs, and felt complete. There would still be challenges ahead. Duke's grandfather would need time to accept this. Some club members would never fully approve. Building a life that bridged their two worlds would require constant navigation and compromise. But they would face it together, with honesty, courage, and the kind of love that had survived 12 months of denial and fought its way to this moment. As Duke drove them back to Bridgeport, Eleanor's hand in his, she thought about all the practical choices she'd made in her life, the safe decisions, the careful planning, the risk mitigation. None of them had made her as happy as this one impractical, complicated, absolutely right choice. She'd chosen love over security, desire over comfort, and she'd found something more valuable than either, a partner who saw her completely, who fought for her fiercely, who would spend the rest of his life making sure she never regretted taking the leap. The Duke had finally cut in on the 365th day, and Eleanor had been waiting for him all along.